Most people think the worst thing a family can do is hit you. They're wrong. The worst thing is when they steal the only thing that was truly yours, and then ask you to thank them for it. My brother built his entire career on something that came from my mind, my hands, my sleepless nights. And my parents? They held the door open for him. This is the story of how I closed it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Story. Get comfortable, grab your coffee. The people in this story had every chance to do the right thing. They just didn't. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. The Addams family had 2 children. But if you looked at our living room wall, you'd think there was only one. Dylan's photos covered every inch of that hallway. Graduation cap tossed in the air, internship badge clipped to a pressed shirt, Employee of the Quarter plaque held up with both hands and that camera-ready grin. There was one photo of me, tucked near the coat closet, 9th grade science fair. I'd built a neural network classifier from scratch, and I was holding the first place ribbon like I didn't quite believe it. Nobody in my family had understood the project. Nobody had asked. Our house sat on a quiet street in the kind of Midwestern suburb where neighbors waved from their porches and measured success by whose kid got mentioned in the church bulletin first. My father, Richard Adams, 54, retired mechanical engineer, ran the household the way he'd run a production floor, with budgets, timelines, and final say. My mother, Diane, 52, stayed home, kept the garden immaculate, and loved both her children. She just loved one of them louder. And then there was Dylan, 27. Tall, easy smile, the kind of handshake that made older men nod with approval. Senior developer at Meridian Technologies, a Fortune 500 tech firm 2 states over. Engaged to a woman named Brooke, who looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle catalog. My parents called him our star. And me, Angela Adams, 22. Senior year at a mid-tier state university my parents chose because it was good enough. GPA, 3.95, researching machine learning algorithms under a professor who actually knew my name. But at Sunday dinners, when I mentioned my research, my mother would smile that patient smile and say, "That's nice, honey. Dylan, tell your father about the promotion." Let me tell you something about quiet people. We're not quiet because we have nothing to say. We're quiet because we're watching. And I didn't mind the shadows. Not really. What I minded was discovering what my brother was doing in the dark. The best thing about code is that it doesn't lie. 2 plus 2 is always 4. Nobody can charm it into 5. My real life happened between midnight and 4 a.m. in the university's computer science lab, a windowless room on the 3rd floor of Whitaker Hall that smelled like stale coffee and overheated processors. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering in a rhythm I'd memorized like a heartbeat. I'd sit at the same terminal, headphones on, and disappear into the architecture of an algorithm the way some people disappear into prayer. That semester, I was building something I was genuinely proud of, an adaptive optimization algorithm for large-scale data processing, and it could learn from its own errors and recalibrate in real time. I'd been developing it for almost 2 years. Version after version, each one sharper than the last. Every iteration lived in my private repository, time-stamped, annotated, mine. My advisor, Dr. Elaine Marsh, was 58, silver-haired and allergic to small talk. The first time she reviewed my code, she pulled her reading glasses down and looked at me over the frames. "This is graduate-level work, Adams. Why are you here?" My parents said this school was good enough. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she handed me a brochure. Thick paper, embossed crest, a university in Washington, D.C., that I'd only ever seen in rankings I scrolled past because dreaming about it felt wasteful. "Apply," she said. "You deserve a place that sees you." I tucked the brochure into my bag. I didn't tell anyone at home. My laptop was old and temperamental, so I kept backups on the family cloud account. The shared drive my father had set up years ago for tax documents and vacation photos. I didn't know it then, but the backup on that family cloud was about to cost me everything, and then give me everything back. Dylan had a talent, not for coding, for arriving. Sunday dinners were sacred in the Addams household. Diane set the table with her grandmother's china, lit the same vanilla candle, roasted the same rosemary potatoes. Every week, without fail. Dylan showed up 40 minutes late that particular Sunday. Nobody said a word. When I arrived 5 minutes early and started chopping onions, my mother patted my shoulder absently. She in the way you'd pat a dog for not chewing the furniture. Traffic was insane, Dylan said, dropping into his chair like the restaurant had been holding his reservation. He smelled like expensive cologne, the kind you buy when someone else is paying your rent, which, until recently, my parents had been. Over pot roast, he launched into a story about a project at Meridian. Something about predictive analytics, pattern recognition, optimizing data pipelines. He used the terminology casually, confidently, the way you'd describe a recipe you'd cooked 100 times. I recognized every word, because I'd written them. Richard leaned back, chest puffed. That's my boy. Diane beamed, the candlelight catching the pride in her eyes. I set my fork down. I'm presenting a paper at the Undergraduate Research Symposium next month on adaptive optimization. Diane glanced at me. That's wonderful, honey. She turned to Dylan. Dylan, tell Dad about the promotion. Dylan caught my eye across the table and winked. Not a brotherly wink, the kind a card player gives when he knows you can see his hand and can't do anything about it. Now, if you've ever been the kid who set the table while your sibling got the applause, you already know what's coming. That wink. I'd seen it 100 times, but that Sunday, for the first time, I started counting what it cost me. The first time Dylan stole from me, he called it borrowing. The second time, he called it collaborating. By the fifth time, he didn't call it anything at all. I was 16. Dylan was 21, grinding through a master's program in computer science at a decent school 2 hours north. He called me one night, I voice tight with panic. Angie, I need help. I've got a final project due Friday and I'm drowning. Can you just walk me through your approach to that sorting algorithm you built for the science fair? I didn't walk him through it. I wrote it for him. Sat on my bed with my laptop balanced on a textbook, typing code while he dictated what his professor wanted. Took me 3 hours. He got an A+. When I saw that grade posted on his fridge during Thanksgiving, something small and sharp turned in my chest. I thought you said you rewrote most of it, I said. He grinned. I cleaned it up. I looked at Mom. She was drying a casserole dish. He's your brother, Angela. Family helps family. That became the pattern. Dylan would call, late, always urgent. Could I explain this concept? Could I sketch out this framework? And could I just take a look at something? Each time, he took a little more. Each time, I said a little less. The night Dylan got his acceptance letter from Meridian Technologies, my father popped a bottle of cheap champagne in the kitchen. The cork hit the ceiling and left a mark that's probably still there. Diane cried happy tears. I clapped. I smiled. Nobody in that kitchen knew that the capstone project securing Dylan's master's degree, the one that caught Meridian's eye, ran on code I'd written at 17. In my experience, the first lie is always the most expensive. Not for the liar, for the person who forgives it. And that was just the appetizer. The main course was still 6 years away. I used to think being invisible was the worst thing. Then I learned there's something worse. Being visible only when they need something. And the day I won the Caldwell Merit Scholarship, competitive, research-based, the kind of thing professors write letters for, I called my mother from the lab. My hands were still shaking. Dr. Marsh had hugged me, which was roughly equivalent to a standing ovation from anyone else. Mom, I got the scholarship. That's wonderful, honey. Oh, before I forget, Dylan's getting engaged. Can you believe it? Brooke is just darling. We're having a party next month. I'll need you to help with the decorations. The week I presented my first research paper at a regional conference, 20 minutes of original work in front of actual scientists who asked actual questions. Nobody from my family was in the audience. That same week, the entire Adams clan flew to see Dylan receive his Employee of the Quarter plaque at Meridian's regional office. And there were photos. They made the family group text. I stopped expecting things after that. Not dramatically, No slamming doors, no tearful confrontations. I just quietly rearranged my calendar. Sundays became lab days. Holiday visits got shorter. I started spending more time with my data and less time at a dinner table where my name was background noise. Nobody asked why. Dr. Marsh noticed, though. She was the kind of professor who read between the lines the way she read code. Carefully, and with an eye for what was missing. You stopped smiling, Adams. I stopped pretending. She handed me a brochure that afternoon. Same university crest, thicker paper this time, a note clipped to the front. The transfer deadline is March 1st. You deserve a place that sees you. I put it in my desk drawer, but I didn't throw it away. And the email arrived on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are supposed to be boring. It was February, my last semester at the state school. I was in the lab at 11 p.m., debugging a subroutine, when my inbox pinged. The sender was a name I didn't recognize, Marcus Webb. The subject line read, "Quick question about your optimization paper." I opened it. "Hi, Angela. I came across your working paper on adaptive optimization algorithms while researching a similar problem. Interesting work. I noticed some remarkable similarities to the core engine behind the predictive analytics platform at Meridian Technologies, developed by your brother Dylan Adams. Did you two collaborate on the underlying approach? I'd love to know more about the shared methodology." Marcus Webb, Data Architect. Prior Analytics, formerly Meridian Technologies. My hands went still on the keyboard. I read the email 3 times. Then I opened Meridian's public tech blog in another tab. Typed Dylan's name. His author page loaded. Headshot, title, and 4 published posts about his predictive analytics engine. I clicked the first one. The architecture diagram was mine. The optimization logic was mine. The variable names were different. He'd gone through and renamed them, the way you'd change a font on a stolen essay. But the structure, the flow, the elegant recursion I'd spent 14 months perfecting. Mine. Every line. I opened the family cloud drive, navigated to my project folder, clicked Access History. 47 entries. 47 times, Dylan had opened my files over the past 3 years. Timestamps: 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Weekends I was away at conferences, holidays when I was asleep down the hall. I sat in that lab for a long time. The fluorescent light flickered. The processors hummed. The coffee in my cup went cold. I didn't cry. I just sat there, doing math. 6 years of theft, multiplied by everything he'd built on it. 47 times. He'd opened my files 47 times, and I'd been sitting at his dinner table every Sunday passing him the salt. Dr. Marsh taught me the most important lesson of my life that February afternoon. Not about code, about chess. I'd walked into her office with a printout of the cloud access history and a face that must have looked like a closed fist. She read the pages without interrupting, then set them down and folded her hands. "What do you want, Angela? Revenge or your future?" I wanted to say both. Instead, I said, "Can I have Tuesday?" She almost smiled. "Tell me your plan." Here was the math. If I confronted Dylan now, my parents would circle the wagons. They'd cut my tuition, my only financial lifeline. I'd lose my apartment, my lab access, my last semester. I'd blow up my life to make a point, and Dylan would still have his job, his degree, and his story. My word against his, and in the Adams family, his word had always outranked mine. But if I waited, if I applied for the transfer first, secured an exit, and built my case properly, I could leave on my terms, with somewhere to go. "The transfer deadline is March 1st, I said. "I know," Dr. Marsh said. "I already drafted your recommendation letter. I was waiting for you to ask." That night I began organizing what I already had. My repository history with timestamps predating Dylan's submissions by months. My research notes. Handwritten, dated, cross-referenced. Email threads with Dr. Marsh discussing the algorithm's development. Everything existed. I just had to put it in order. Dr. Marsh signed her letter the following morning. 3 pages. She didn't hold back. I submitted the transfer application on February 28th. Then I drove home and helped my mother chop onions for Sunday dinner, sat across from Dylan, laughed at his jokes, passed the bread. There is a kind of patience that looks like weakness. It isn't. It's the patience of someone who knows exactly when the bridge will hold their weight. 3 months of pretending is harder than you'd think. Not the lying, the smiling. March through May was a masterclass in self-control. I attended every Sunday dinner. I nodded when Dylan talked about his projects. I said, "That's great," in all the right places. I ate my mother's pot roast and complimented the seasoning and excused myself early to study. Meanwhile, Dylan was getting bolder. April. He casually mentioned a performance bonus, something about the analytics engine exceeding projections. He bought Brooke a ring. Not modest. My father whistled when he saw the photos. "Meridian's treating you right, son." Dylan shrugged the way people shrug when they want you to notice their new watch. May. He announced that his team was presenting the predictive analytics engine to Meridian's executive board. If they greenlight national scaling, I'm looking at VP of engineering within 2 years. Richard raised his glass. Diane teared up. One night in late May, my phone buzzed at 11:45. Dylan. "Angie, quick question. The recursive optimization layer. Does it collapse if you push the dataset past 10 million entries, or does it self-correct?" He was asking me to explain code he claimed he'd written. "It self-corrects," I said. "There's a dampening function in the third loop. It redistributes the load." Right. I knew that. Just confirming. I hung up and added the call to my timeline. Date, duration, content. Not a recording, just a note. One more line in a document that was getting longer by the week. June 1st. 6:02 in the morning, my phone screen lit up the dark room. And the email had a crest I'd memorized from a brochure I'd kept in my desk for 8 months. "Dear Ms. Adams, congratulations on your acceptance." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on my nightstand, stared at the ceiling, and let the sunrise turn the room gold. I had my ticket out. All I needed now was the right moment to use it. I didn't know it yet, but Dylan was about to hand me that moment on a silver platter. If you've made it this far, you can probably feel what's coming. Before things get real, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like. I promise you, you do not want to miss what happens at that dinner table. Let's keep going. Dylan had the kind of voice that made everything sound like a reasonable request. Even theft. It was mid-June. I'd confirmed my enrollment at the university in D.C. 2 days earlier, quietly, from a coffee shop, with no witnesses and no champagne. The transfer was locked. My future was sealed. All that remained was the leaving. Then Dylan called. Sugar in his tone, the way it always was when he needed something. "Hey, Angie. Got a favor to ask. The board presentation is in 3 weeks, and there's a section of the analytics engine I want to refine. The recursive layer. Remember we talked about it? Like we'd built it together in a garage, like it was ours." "Which section?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. He described it. Every technical detail he listed was something I'd coded between midnight and dawn in a lab he'd never set foot in. He rattled it off with the easy confidence of a man reading from a script someone else wrote. "Sure, Dylan. I can take a look." "You're the best, Angie. Seriously. I owe you one." Ladies, you know that feeling. When someone takes credit for your recipe at the potluck and everyone compliments them. Multiply that by 6 years and a Fortune 500 salary. "Family helps family," I said. He laughed. He actually laughed. After I hung up, I sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I opened the timeline document on my laptop and typed, June 14th. Dylan requested help understanding recursive optimization layer of the analytics engine he claims to have built. Duration, 22 minutes. He could not explain the dampening function without guidance. In my experience, the person who says we're a team usually means you do the work and I take the bow. I helped him, smiled through it, and added one more line to the document that was going to end him. And when my mother said important dinner, she meant one thing. Someone was about to be put in their place, and it was never Dylan. The call came on a Monday. Diane's voice had that particular brightness she used when she'd already decided something and wanted it to sound like a suggestion. Friday dinner at the house, Angela. Your father has something he'd like to discuss. Dylan and Brooke will be there. What's it about, Mom? Just come, sweetheart. We'll talk over dinner. I texted Dylan. What's Friday about? His reply came fast. Just come. It'll be fine. The same tone he used right before he asked for something. The same casual certainty of a man who'd never been told no by the two people sitting at the head of that table. I knew. I couldn't prove it yet, but I felt it the way you feel a storm before the sky changes. Something in the pressure, something in the silence between words. They were going to make me apologize. That night, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by textbooks and packing tape. The transfer was confirmed. Classes in DC started in August. The lease on my apartment ended July 31st. Everything fit. I opened my laptop and finalized the email I'd been drafting for 3 weeks. 2 recipients: Meridian Technologies, Office of Corporate Compliance, and the Committee on Academic Integrity at Dylan's alma mater. Attached: the full timeline, the code comparison, the access logs, Dr. Marsh's letter. Everything organized, annotated, professional. All I had to do was press send. Not yet. I wanted to give them Friday. One last chance to see me, to hear me, to choose correctly. I started packing my room that night, box by box, quiet as a church mouse. 11 boxes by Wednesday. Nobody came upstairs to check. Friday was 2 days away. I packed my life into 11 boxes and wondered if anyone would notice they were there. That last Sunday before Friday, I washed the dishes slower than usual. I was memorizing things. It wasn't a scheduled family dinner. I'd come by to pick up a box of winter clothes from my old room, but Diane was cooking anyway, because Diane was always cooking, and the kitchen smelled like lemon dish soap and the particular warmth of a house that runs on routine. Dylan wasn't there. Just me and Mom, elbow deep in suds, the television murmuring a baseball game from the living room where Richard had fallen asleep in his recliner. You know, Diane said, handing me a wet plate. Your brother works so hard. I wish you'd be a little more supportive. I dried the plate, set it in the rack, picked up the next one. I know, Mom. I am. She smiled. That soft, distracted smile she wore when she believed what she needed to believe. I didn't push it. There was no point. Pushing Diane Adams toward a truth she didn't want was like pushing water uphill. It just ran around your hands. I looked around the kitchen while she hummed. The scratch marks on the doorframe where Dad had measured our heights. Mine stopped at 14. He'd forgotten after that. The magnolia tree through the window, planted by my grandmother, the only woman in this family who ever looked at me the way Dr. Marsh did. The hallway lined with Dylan's photographs, and my one small picture near the coat closet, already fading behind the glass. I wasn't angry at the house. I was angry that the house had never been home. Not really. Not for me. I dried the last plate, hung the towel on the oven handle, and said goodnight. My mother didn't look up. She was scrolling through photos of Brooke's engagement ring on her phone, smiling at the screen the way I wished she'd smile at me. Some things never change, and some things were about to. Dylan made exactly one mistake that Wednesday. He got comfortable. I was at the house again, dropping off a casserole dish Mom had lent me months ago. Dylan's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. He rarely visited midweek unless he wanted something. He was in the kitchen, drinking Dad's good bourbon from a coffee mug like it was water. He looked relaxed, loose, the kind of loose that comes from believing you're untouchable. Angie? Perfect timing. He leaned against the counter. I've been thinking about the board presentation. This is going to change everything. How so? If they greenlight scaling the algorithm nationally, I'm looking at VP of Engineering within 2 years. VP Angie, at 28. He swirled the bourbon. Dad cried when I told him. Actually cried. I poured myself a glass of water, drank it slowly. That's amazing, Dylan. Your algorithm must be really something. He didn't hear the trap. Why would he? Nobody had ever set one for him. Oh, it is. You know me. Once I get into a problem, I don't let go. He laughed, tossing his car keys in the air and catching them. They jingled. A bright, careless sound. The recursive layer alone took me, 8 months to crack? 14. It took me 14 months. But who's counting? I know, I said. I really do. He finished the bourbon, rinsed the mug, and clapped me on the shoulder on his way out. His cologne lingered after the door closed, something woodsy and expensive, bought with bonuses earned on my work. I stood alone in the kitchen and added his words to my notes. Dylan claimed full authorship of the algorithm, June 17th, referenced the recursive layer as his own work, did not mention my involvement. Let me tell you how to spot a liar in your own house. They always look most relaxed right before the roof falls in. VP of Engineering, built on my code. I almost admired the ambition. Almost. There's a kind of quiet that comes the night before you change your life. It sounds like crickets and a cursor blinking. Thursday night. My apartment was already a ghost of itself. Bare walls, stripped bed. 11 sealed boxes stacked against the wall like brown paper soldiers. I sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop balanced on a cardboard box labeled, Books, Heavy. I opened the email draft one final time. Read every word. Recipient 1, compliance@meridiantech.com. Recipient 2, academic integrity at university.edu. Subject line, formal report, intellectual property, misrepresentation and academic fraud. Attachments, timeline, 46 pages, code comparison analysis, side-by-side, time-stamped, cloud access logs, 47 entries, and Dr. Marsh's signed letter confirming my authorship. It was clean, professional, the kind of document that doesn't shout. It just stands there and waits for someone to read it. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Tomorrow first. Friday dinner first. One final chance. I picked up my phone and called Dr. Marsh. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. I'm ready, I said. A pause. Then, in that quiet, steady voice, Angela, whatever happens tomorrow, remember, you earned every bit of what's coming next. The good parts. Thank you, Dr. Marsh. For everything. Don't thank me. Just go be who you are. Somewhere that deserves it. I hung up and looked out the window. June night. Crickets singing their hearts out in the bushes below. A thin moon, curved like a closing parenthesis. The neighbor's porch light throwing a yellow square on the sidewalk. Somewhere in this town, Dylan was sleeping soundly. My parents were watching late-night television with the volume too loud. Brooke was probably pinning wedding centerpieces on her phone. None of them knew. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. And I had a family dinner to attend, and then I had a family to leave. I ran 4 miles that Friday morning, not to clear my head. My head was already clear. I ran because my body needed to catch up with my decision. 6 a.m. The streets were empty except for a man walking a beagle and a paperboy on a bicycle who looked like he'd time-traveled from 1985. The air tasted like damp asphalt and cut grass, the way Midwestern mornings do before the heat settles in. I ran east, toward the sunrise, past the gas station where I'd had my first summer job, past the middle school where I'd won my first coding competition, past the library where I'd taught myself Python from a book with a cracked spine. This town had raised me, even if my family hadn't. Back at the apartment, I showered, dressed simply, jeans, a clean blouse, flats. No armor, no costume. I didn't need one. Final checks. Transfer confirmation email. Saved. 11 boxes. Sealed and labeled. Rental van. Booked for 6 a.m. Saturday. Apartment key. On the kitchen counter. Ready to leave behind. I slid a USB drive into my jacket pocket. It was small. Brushed silver. The size of a thumb. On it, a presentation I'd built the week before. Side-by-side code comparison. My original files on the left, timestamps glowing in green. Dylan's submissions on the right, timestamps in red. Months later. Same logic, same structure, different variable names. Like a plagiarist who thinks changing the font makes it original. The USB wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. just in case my family needed to see what I'd been looking at for months. At 6:15 p.m., I got in my car. The summer light was going golden, slanting through the windshield, and turning the dashboard warm. I pulled out of the apartment complex for the last time. The USB in my jacket pocket weighed less than a coin. What was on it weighed about 6 years. The dining room smelled like roast and reckoning. I parked behind Dylan's SUV, the new one, charcoal gray, financed with a Meridian salary built on my blueprints. Brooke's white sedan was there too. Full house. My mother met me at the door with a hug that lasted a beat too long. Her magnolia perfume filled the hallway. "I'm glad you came, sweetheart. Wouldn't miss it." The dining room was set for 5. Diane's grandmother's china, the cream-colored kind with gold edges she only used for occasions. Candles lit, 2 tapers in brass holders. Pot roast centered on the table with roasted carrots fanning out like a crown. A bottle of red wine, if the good kind Richard kept on the high shelf. Whatever was about to happen, my parents had dressed it up. Richard sat at the head, jaw set, fingers laced. Diane took the chair to his left. Dylan and Brooke sat across from them. Dylan in a blue button-down, sleeves rolled, relaxed as a man with nothing to hide. Brooke smiled at me and squeezed my hand when I walked past. She had kind eyes. I almost felt sorry for what was coming. My chair was at the foot of the table, farthest from the door. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. Small talk circled the table like a nervous bird. Brooke mentioned wedding venues. Diane asked about cake flavors. Richard poured wine with a steady hand but didn't drink. Dylan ate quickly, eyes on his plate. He knew something was coming too. He just thought it was aimed at me. The roast was good. Thyme and onion, it to caramelized edges, the kind of cooking my mother did when she wanted the meal to say what she couldn't. If you've made it this far, I think you understand why I did what I did next. My father cleared his throat. And just like that, the evening stopped pretending. My father used the word address, the way some people use a gavel. "Angela, your mother and I need to address something." He straightened in his chair. Richard Adams at the head of the table, hands flat on either side of his plate, shoulders squared. This wasn't a conversation. It was a sentencing. "Your brother has expressed concern that you've been distant, cold, unsupportive of his accomplishments." I looked at Dylan. He had the decency to look down. For about 2 seconds. Then he raised his chin and arranged his face into something wounded and earnest. "I just want my sister back," he said, voice catching, eyes glistening, a performance so polished it should have come with an intermission. "I miss her." Diane reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "He's been so upset, Angela." Richard continued. "Your brother has done nothing but make this family proud. He's worked hard, built a career, found a wonderful partner." Glance at Brooke. Back to me. "And you sit there with that attitude." Diane leaned in, voice soft, the guilt trip whisper she'd perfected over decades. "Honey, we're not asking much. Just apologize, clear the air, so we can all move forward as a family." "Apologize for what exactly?" I asked. Richard didn't blink. "For your behavior, for the jealousy, for making your brother feel unwelcome in his own family. And until you do," he added, reaching for his wine, "your mother and I have decided to pause our contribution to your education, for your own good." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Brooke stared at her plate. Diane nodded, eyes red, loyal to the script. Dylan pressed his lips together, not remorse, anticipation. I set my knife and fork down, parallel, the way Diane had taught me. Looked at each of them. Took a breath. They wanted one word from me. An apology. They got one word. Just not the one they expected. "All right. This is the moment everything changes. If you're still here, you're one of the rare ones. 97% of people scroll past without subscribing. But you stayed. That tells me something about you. Hit subscribe, because what comes next? You deserve to see it. One word. 4 letters." And the whole table shifted. 5 seconds of silence. I could hear the candle flames whispering in their holders. Diane's bracelet clinked against the table. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. Fine. Richard's shoulders dropped. A smile broke across his face. The satisfied kind. The kind a man wears when the world bends his way. Diane exhaled and put a hand on her chest. Dylan sat back, arms folded, vindicated. They thought I was surrendering. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Fine, I said again. You can keep the tuition. I don't need it anymore. The smile on Richard's face didn't disappear. It just froze, like a clock that stops between ticks. Diane blinked. What do you mean, you don't need it? I've been accepted to transfer to a university in Washington, D.C. Full academic merit consideration. I confirmed my enrollment 2 days ago. Nobody moved. The candles kept burning. What? Richard's voice had lost its gavel. Dylan's face went white. Not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. My room at the apartment is already packed. 11 boxes. Diane stood halfway, gripping the table edge. Angela, you can't just... You didn't even tell us. You didn't ask. You never asked. Brooke's fork slipped from her fingers and clinked against the china. She didn't pick it up. Dylan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His eyes had gone from confident to calculating to something I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. Angela, he said slowly. Let's talk about this. Let's, I said, and sat back down. My father's smile hadn't disappeared yet, but it was about to. Dylan's face went from tan to paper in about 3 seconds, and I'd never seen color leave a person that fast. Angela, wait, he said. His chair scraped back. Let's talk about this privately. There's no need to... Talk about what, Dylan? I kept my voice level, conversational, like we were discussing the weather. The algorithm? The one you presented to Meridian's executive board? The one you've been passing off as yours for 6 years? The dining room became a vacuum. Brooke looked at Dylan. Diane looked at Richard. Richard looked at me. Dylan tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. Angela, come on, you're being... I sent the documentation this morning. I folded my hands on the table. To Meridian's Office of Corporate Compliance, and to the Committee on Academic Integrity at your graduate school. I want you to picture this. A dining room, 6 candles dying on a table, 5 people. And one lie that just lost its legs. Dylan gripped the back of his chair. His knuckles were white. Please tell me you didn't send it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Richard leaned forward, sharp now, the engineer in him sensing a structural failure. Send what? What is she talking about, Dylan? Dylan said nothing. For the first time in 27 years, the golden boy had no script. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my laptop bag, and set the computer on the table between the pot roast and the wine. I opened the presentation. 2 columns filled the screen. Left side, my code, my timestamps, my name. Right side, Dylan's submissions. Months later, same architecture, renamed variables. Dad, your son has been submitting my code as his own work. For 6 years. Everything. The promotions, the bonuses, the VP track, all of it. Built on mine. Richard stared at the screen, his mouth opened. No sound came out. My father stopped smiling, and for the first time in 22 years, the room was listening to me. Dylan tried the only move he had left. He tried to be the victim. She's lying. His voice cracked on the second word. She's always been jealous of me. This is some kind of revenge fantasy. She probably faked those timestamps. I didn't argue. I turned the laptop so the screen faced Dylan directly. Explain the recursive optimization layer, Dylan, right now. Walk us through it. Silence. You told Dad it took you 8 months to develop. Explain how it works. His jaw worked. Nothing came out. Brooke's chair moved first. A slow push back from the table. Not dramatic. Just a woman making distance between herself and a stranger. Dylan. Her voice was very small. Is this true? He looked at her. at his father, at his mother. Found no rescue in any of their faces. His mouth opened and the lie that came out was so thin you could see through it. It was a collaboration. She helped, sure, but You called me 3 weeks ago, I said quietly, because you couldn't explain the dampening function in the third loop. The code you claim you wrote. You didn't understand it, Dylan. Because you didn't write it. Brooke stood up. She didn't slam her chair. She didn't cry. She picked up her purse from the sideboard, said, "Excuse me," and walked out the front door. The latch clicked shut behind her. Soft. Final. Diane buried her face in her hands. The sound she made wasn't crying exactly. It was the sound of a story collapsing. "Angela," she whispered through her fingers, "why didn't you tell me? I told you 100 times, Mom. Every time, you said family helps family." Richard hadn't moved. He sat at the head of his table staring at a screen full of proof that his star was made of borrowed light. I closed the laptop, put on my jacket, picked up my bag. "I'm leaving in the morning. I won't be back for a while." I walked out past the photos on the wall, past the coat closet, past my one small picture in the corner, already fading behind the glass. I didn't take it with me. I didn't turn the radio on. Some silences need to be heard. The drive from my parents' house to my apartment was 14 minutes. I'd made it 1,000 times. Past the Presbyterian church with the crooked steeple. Past the Dairy Queen where Dylan and I used to split blizzards after Little League games. Him playing, me keeping score in a notebook because nobody thought to ask if I wanted to bat. That night, the streetlights painted the dashboard in gold stripes that slid over my hands on the wheel. My knuckles ached. I'd been gripping something invisible for 6 years and only just let go. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel righteous. I felt the way a house feels after you move the furniture out, spacious and strange and echoing with the shapes of things that used to be there. Somewhere around the third stoplight, a memory surfaced without permission. Dylan, 10 years old. Me, 5. We were building a Lego castle on the living room carpet, and I couldn't get the turret to stay upright. It kept toppling. Dylan reached over, adjusted the base plate, and said, "There. Now it'll hold." He wasn't a thief then. He was my big brother. I cried at the fourth stoplight. Not for long. Not loudly. Not for the man he'd become. For the boy he'd stopped being. Somewhere between 10 and 21, something in Dylan had decided that shortcuts were the same as roads, and nobody in that house had corrected him. My apartment was dark when I pulled in. 11 boxes against the wall, empty hangers in the closet, a key on the kitchen counter. I set my alarm for 5:30, sat on the edge of the bare mattress and listened to the apartment tick and settle around me. By sunrise, my room would be empty, and so would theirs. I set the alarm for 5:30. By sunrise, my room would be empty, and so would theirs. And I carried 11 boxes and 22 years of silence down 2 flights of stairs. 5:30 came fast. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of something that felt like sleep's waiting room. But when the alarm went off, I was already sitting up, already dressed, already done. The rental van was parked in the lot, white and plain and ready. I loaded the boxes myself. Nobody helped. Nobody knew. The morning air was cool for June, and dew sat on the grass like someone had scattered glass beads overnight. Box by box, books, winter clothes, the framed photo of my grandmother, my laptop case, a coffee mug from Dr. Marsh that said, "Syntax error, please reboot." A department joke that only she and I found funny. Last sweep of the apartment. Bathroom, empty. Kitchen, clean. Bedroom, bare mattress, bare walls. Even the outline of a poster I'd taken down still faintly visible in the paint. The key sat on the counter like a period at the end of a sentence. I locked the door from the outside, dropped the key through the mail slot. In the van, I checked my phone. 14 missed calls from Diane, 6 from Richard, 0 from Dylan. He knew better. 3 text messages from Mom. "Please call me. Angela, please. We need to talk." I didn't respond. There would be time for that later. Or there wouldn't. Right now, the road pointed east and I intended to follow it. I stopped for gas and coffee at a truck stop just past the county line. The coffee was burnt and thin, the way gas station coffee always is. I bought it anyway. Stood by the van and watched the sun come up, a smear of orange and pink spreading across the horizon like paint on wet paper. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. Small. Real. The sun came up somewhere past the state line. I drove straight into it. 2 weeks into my new life, my old life started burning. Washington, D.C. in July was a steam bath. Thick, heavy air that made your clothes stick and your hair curl. My dorm room was small. Cinder block walls painted the kind of institutional white that says temporary in every language. A twin bed, a desk, a window that overlooked a courtyard where oak trees older than the building threw shade across brick paths. It wasn't glamorous. It was mine. Orientation had been a blur of handshakes and campus maps, and that particular electricity you feel when everyone around you is exactly where they want to be. For the first time, nobody at a dinner table was explaining to me that I was less. I could breathe in a way I hadn't known I'd stopped breathing. Then the email arrived. Dear Ms. Adams, we have received your documentation and have opened a formal investigation into the intellectual property claims outlined in your report. You may be contacted for further information. Please retain all original files and communications. Office of Corporate Compliance, Meridian Technologies. I read it on a bench under the oaks. Noon. The chapel bell was ringing 12 slow notes across the quad. Students walked past carrying iced coffees and arguing about Kierkegaard. That evening, a text from Marcus Webb. Thought you should know. Meridian suspended Dylan pending the investigation. He's been locked out of all systems. Badge deactivated. It's real. Angela. I set the phone on the bench beside me and stared at the oak leaves shifting overhead. A squirrel dropped an acorn. It bounced twice on the bricks. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't call anyone to gloat. You know what's funny? They never once asked me how I felt. Dylan's badge stopped working on a Tuesday. Tuesdays, it turned out, were anything but boring. Dylan called on a Thursday. His voice sounded the way it did when he was 12 and broke Mom's favorite vase. Except this time, the vase was his career. My phone buzzed during office hours prep. I almost let it ring out. Then I picked up. Because some conversations you owe yourself. Do you have any idea what you've done? No greeting, no charm, just heat. They're going to fire me, Angela. They're talking about legal action. They want their bonuses back. Is that what you wanted? What I wanted was for you to stop taking what's mine. It was just code, Angela. His voice climbed. Just lines on a screen. I improved it. I deployed it. You couldn't explain the dampening function, Dylan. You called me at midnight to help you understand your own presentation. Silence. I could hear him breathing through his nose, the way he did when he was cornered. Pull the complaint. Quieter now. Negotiating. Tell them you gave me permission. Tell them it was a collaboration. We can fix this. No. Angela? No. You're going to ruin my life over some code? I looked out my dorm window at the courtyard. A girl with a ponytail was reading under the oak tree, cross-legged, highlighter in hand. Normal. Peaceful. Earned. You ruined your life over some code, Dylan. And I just stopped pretending you didn't. The line went quiet. I could hear a clock ticking on his end. An old clock, maybe the one in Mom's hallway. He was at their house. Of course he was. I'm your brother, he said, like it was a password, like it still opened doors. I know. That's what made it worse. I hung up. The silence after was the cleanest sound I'd heard in years. In my experience, the person who says it's just code, or it's just an idea, has never created anything in their life. My mother called me 3 times before I picked up. 3 times is Diane Adams for, I have no one else to turn to. Your father isn't eating. Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual brightness. Dylan might face a civil lawsuit. Brooke called off the engagement. How did we get here, Angela? I was sitting at my dorm desk. A statistics textbook opened to chapter 4. My roommate was at the library. The late July sun slanted through the window and made a warm rectangle on the floor. Mom, you got here because for 6 years, every time I told you Dylan was using my work, you told me to be a good sister. I didn't know it was this much. You didn't want to know. She was quiet for a while. I could hear the house in the background. The refrigerator hum, the tick of the hallway clock, the sounds of my childhood, playing on without me. Then she got to the reason she'd really called. Angela, is there any way to withdraw the complaint? For the family? Your father co-signed Dylan's mortgage. If Dylan loses his income, your father is liable for $350,000 on his retirement. I closed my eyes. Let the math land. Richard Adams, 54, fixed income, co-signing a mortgage for a son whose salary was built on stolen blueprints. The house of cards went all the way down. Mom, I love you, but I won't set myself on fire to keep Dylan warm. Not anymore. Angela, tell Dad I'm sorry about the mortgage. Truly. But Dylan signed that loan on a salary he didn't earn. That's between him, Dad, and Meridian. She made a sound. Something between a sigh and a swallow. You used to be such a sweet girl, she whispered. I still am, Mom. I'm just not a quiet one anymore. She hung up without saying goodbye. I understood. Some goodbyes take longer than a phone call. The email from the academic committee arrived while I was studying for my first midterm at my new school. Timing, it turned out, had a sense of humor. September. And the campus had gone gold and russet overnight, as if someone had adjusted the color settings on the whole city. I was in the library, 3rd floor, the quiet section near the east windows where the light was good and the chairs were broken in just right. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. The sender was the Office of Academic Integrity at Dylan's graduate school. Following a thorough review of the evidence submitted, including code comparison analysis, access logs, and expert testimony, the committee has concluded that Mr. Dylan R. Adams committed substantial violations of the university's academic integrity policy. The Master of Science degree awarded to Mr. Adams has been formally revoked, effective immediately. Revoked. I read the word twice. It sat on the screen like a stone in still water. 3 words undid 6 years of fiction. Dylan Adams, Master of Science. Struck from the record. I learned later from Marcus that Meridian moved the same week. Once the degree revocation became official, their hands were tied. Dylan had been hired and promoted based on credentials that no longer existed. Formal termination. And their legal team had begun proceedings to recover $180,000 in performance bonuses paid under false pretenses. Students milled around me in the library, turning pages, typing papers, sipping from travel mugs. Normal life. The world wasn't pausing to acknowledge that a man's career had just dissolved. It just kept going. I put the phone down, picked up my highlighter, and went back to chapter 7. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel hollow either. I felt like someone who'd finally finished carrying a suitcase up a very long flight of stairs and could now set it down. Dylan Adams, Master of Science. Revoked. 3 words that unwrote 6 years of fiction. My father had never once said, "I'm sorry," in 54 years of living. I know because I'd been counting. The call came on a Sunday evening, October. I was walking back from the library, my backpack heavy with textbooks, the DC air cool and clean, the way it gets right before the clocks fall back. Angela. Just my name. No gavel. No authority. Just a tired man holding a telephone. Hi, Dad. I need you to understand something. I didn't know. About the extent of it. Dad. You didn't know because you didn't want to look. He was quiet. I heard him breathe in. A deep, slow draw. If the kind of breath a man takes when the foundation he built his life on just shifted. Not cracked. Shifted. Which is worse, because you can patch a crack. But a shifted foundation means the whole thing was never level to begin with. I raised that boy to be. I thought he was. He stopped. The word successful hung unspoken in the air. Its funeral too fresh for eulogy. You raised him to believe he could take anything he wanted, I said. And you raised me to believe I should let him. Another silence, long enough for a street lamp to click on above me, throwing orange light across the sidewalk. I'm sorry, Angela. 2 words, from a man who'd built walls his whole life and just watched the last one fall. Thank you, Dad. I meant it. But sorry doesn't give me back 6 years, and it doesn't give Dylan back his integrity. And that was his to keep, and he chose not to. I softened, because anger wasn't the point anymore. Take care of yourself, Dad, and take care of Mom. I hung up. The autumn wind carried the last of the conversation down the empty street. I didn't forgive him that day, but I didn't hate him either. I just let the line go quiet and moved on. People think apologies fix things. They don't. They're just the sound a door makes when it finally unsticks. I didn't expect to hear from Brooke. Then again, I didn't expect a lot of things that summer. The text came in November, a month after Richard's call. Short, direct, no emojis. Brooke's style. Angela, I know we were never close, but I wanted you to know. I left Dylan. Not because of what you did, because of what he did. I've been replaying every conversation, every time he talked about his work, every time he brushed off questions I asked about the technical details. He'd get this look. Annoyed. Like I was too dumb to understand. Turns out I was asking the right questions. He just didn't have the answers. I sat on my bed in the dorm, the phone screen glowing in the dark. My roommate's breathing was even on the other side of the room. Outside the window, a tree branch tapped the glass like it was asking to come in. I typed back, I'm sorry you got caught in this, Brooke. You deserved better. A pause. Then, so did you. 3 words. From a woman I'd shared exactly 4 Thanksgiving dinners and a dozen uncomfortable small talks with. 3 words that landed harder than my mother's tears or my father's apology. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Dylan hadn't just stolen my code. He'd stolen Brooke's trust, my parents' pride, his own future. He'd taken every good thing in reach and hollowed it out from the inside, the way termites do. You don't see the damage until someone leans on the wall and it gives. I thought about Dylan at 10, adjusting my Lego base plate. There. Now it'll hold. He'd known how to build things once. Somewhere along the way, he'd decided it was easier to take. She said I deserved better. She was right. But it took me 22 years to agree. My new advisor called my work exceptional. I almost didn't recognize the word. Nobody had ever aimed it at me before. Dr. Helena Torres, sharp, mid-50s, silver rings on every finger, specialized in computational ethics. She'd read my paper before I set foot in her office. The adaptive optimization one. Dr. Marsh had sent it ahead like a letter of introduction. Angela, this algorithm isn't just technically sound. She tapped the printout on her desk. It's thoughtful. The self-correction mechanism has an elegance to it that most senior researchers don't achieve. I sat across from her in a leather chair that smelled like old books and said, "Thank you." 2 simple words. But saying them in an office where the person across the desk actually knew what I'd built. That was new. That was oxygen. October bled into November. I built routines the way I built code. Carefully. Intentionally. Coffee at 7 from the shop on M Street where the barista drew a leaf in the foam without being asked. Morning runs along the Potomac, where the rowing teams cut through the mist like whispered punctuation. Lab hours from 3 to 9. Teaching assistant for an undergraduate section on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 20 freshmen who called me Ms. Adams and raised their hands when I asked questions. I didn't contact my family, not out of spite. There just wasn't anything to say that wouldn't sound like either a peace offering or a victory lap. I kept the door unlocked, but I didn't open it. Boundaries, not barricades. November light in D.C. was different from the Midwest. Softer, older, filtered through stone buildings and bare sycamores that lined the streets like sentinels. Everything here felt earned. The classes, the lab, the desk with my name on a placard outside the TA office. For the first time, I was building something that nobody could take. Not because I hid it, because I was finally surrounded by people who respected it. A year is a long time. Long enough for a lie to die, a career to dissolve, and a girl to become who she was always supposed to be. By the following June, the scoreboard had updated itself. My side, GPA 4.0, first year at the new school. One published paper in a peer-reviewed journal. A summer research fellowship at an AI lab that had rejected 200 applicants and taken 12. A desk by a window. A name people recognized when I walked into a room. Dylan's side, terminated from Meridian Technologies. Master's degree officially revoked. Civil lawsuit pending. Meridian's attorneys seeking repayment of $180,000 in performance-based compensation. Living in our parents' spare bedroom. Applying for jobs that didn't require explaining a 6-year gap built on credentials he no longer had. Richard was making monthly payments on a mortgage he'd co-signed for a house Dylan could no longer afford. $2,800 a month on a retiree's pension. He hadn't complained, at least not to me. Maybe he understood that the bill was his too. He'd co-signed more than a loan. Diane had started therapy. I learned this not from her, but from a card that arrived in my campus mailbox in May. 3 lines in her careful cursive on cream stationery that smelled faintly of magnolia. I'm learning. It's hard. I miss you. I held the card for a long time. Her handwriting had gotten shakier. The G in learning trembled at the bottom. The Y in you trailed off like she'd run out of breath mid-word. I put the card in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to answer it. But I wasn't ready to throw it away either. In my experience, forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a door you open when you're ready to walk through it. Not when they knock. I kept my mother's card. I wasn't ready to answer. But I wasn't ready to throw it away either. The first time I saw my name on a published paper, I didn't cry. I just read it 3 times to make sure it was real. It came out in September, a full year and 3 months after I'd driven east into the sunrise. The journal was reputable, well cited in the field, the kind of publication that opens doors for people who are serious about research. And there, on the first page, in 12-point Times New Roman, Adams, A. The algorithm had evolved. What started as an adaptive optimization framework in a flickering lab at a state university had grown into something larger, a self-correcting system with applications in healthcare data processing, predictive modeling, environmental analysis. I'd taken the seed Dylan stole and grown it into a forest he'd never be able to claim. Dr. Torres read the acceptance notification over my shoulder and squeezed my arm. This is going to open doors, Angela. A lot of them. That evening, I printed a copy, held the pages up to the desk lamp, and watched the light glow through the paper. My name. My work. Nobody else's fingerprints on it. An email arrived from Dr. Marsh at 10:14 p.m. Subject line. No subject. Body. Told you so. EM. I laughed, out loud, in my empty dorm room at 10:14 on a Tuesday night. And the kind of laugh you save for people who believed in you before you believed in yourself. I framed the first page. Small frame, nothing fancy, dark wood, glass front. I set it on my desk next to the only photograph I'd brought from home. My grandmother standing in the garden next to the magnolia tree, squinting into the sun, smiling like she knew something nobody else did. 2 women who saw me, one by blood, one by choice. Adams. A. My name. My work. Finally, just mine. If you're sitting there thinking I would have done the same thing, good. That means you know your worth. People ask me if I miss my family. The honest answer is, I miss the family I wished I had. My life in DC settled into something I hadn't known I'd been chasing. Ordinary goodness. The kind that doesn't make headlines but makes you sleep well at night. Mornings, coffee and a run along the river, the Potomac flat and gray in winter, silver green in spring. Afternoons, lab work, teaching, the steady accumulation of knowledge that comes from being in a place that feeds you instead of draining you. Evenings, jazz drifting up from the bar across the street, a cup of green tea on my desk, code flowing under my fingers like conversation. I answered Diane's card eventually. 3 lines on a plain postcard. I'm okay, Mom. I hope you are too. Take your time. No promises. No door slammed shut. Just a window cracked open, letting in air without letting in rain. Richard sent a check in December. I sent it back with a note. I don't need it, Dad. Put it toward the mortgage. It wasn't a dig. It was the truth. And for the first time, the truth between us didn't have edges. I didn't call Dylan. He didn't call me. There was nothing theatrical about the silence. No grudge, no vendetta. Just 2 people who no longer had anything to say. Maybe one day that would change. Maybe it wouldn't. I'd stopped writing that story for him. Some evenings, when the city lights came on and the windows of my dorm glowed like slots in an advent calendar, I'd sit on the bench in the courtyard and let the quiet settle around me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just free. Some families teach you how to love. Mine taught me how to leave. And leaving, it turned out, was the most loving thing I ever did. For myself. I sat by the river that evening and let the water carry the last of it away. June again. A full year turned like a page. The Potomac moved slow and steady below the bench, carrying pollen and reflected clouds toward the Chesapeake. A rowing shell cut through the current in the distance, oars dipping and rising in a rhythm so clean it looked like breathing. My laptop was open on my knees, code running on the screen, a new project, a new algorithm, something that existed entirely in a space Dylan had never touched, a problem nobody had asked me to solve. I was solving it because I could, because it mattered, because this was what the work looked like when it wasn't stolen or begged for or dismissed. I thought about Dylan at 10, building Lego castles, about Mom lighting candles every Sunday for a family that didn't exist the way she needed it to, about Dad popping champagne in a kitchen that smelled like cheap bubbles and borrowed pride. I didn't hate them. I didn't need to. Hating someone is just another way of staying in the room with them. And I'd already walked out. I don't know if my family will ever heal, I said, to the river, to the sky, to nobody and everybody. I don't know if Dylan will ever take responsibility. I don't know if my mother will ever stop choosing the easy lie over the hard truth. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. But I know this. I am not responsible for their choices. Only for mine. The sun was setting, purple and orange, painting the Potomac in colors that looked like a fresh start. And I chose myself. Finally. I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward campus. The evening air was warm. The path was lit. My steps were light. I didn't destroy him. I just stopped building the floor he was standing on. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment. I read every single one. And come back tomorrow. I'll have the coffee ready and another story waiting. You belong here.